In verse 3, he says, "Beloved, while I was making every effort to write to you about our common salvation, I felt the necessity to write to you appealing that you contend earnestly for the faith which was once for all handed down to the saints." He says he started to write one letter, and something happened that caused him to have to write a letter on a different subject. He said he had to ask them to contend earnestly for the faith. Contend is an interesting word because it means to struggle for or agonize over. And the tense of the verb is to continually agonize over and struggle for the faith. It's the same word that they used for wrestling. Now, I've never wrestled, but my husband played a number of sports, and in college he played both football and he wrestled, and he said nothing is as exhausting as wrestling. He said it takes every ounce of your energy because it's hand-to-hand, constant combat. He said you had to be in great shape to wrestle. I think that that's what Jude is telling us. We need to be in great spiritual shape. We need to contend, wrestle for the faith. In verse 4, he tells us why. "For certain persons have crept in unnoticed, those who were long beforehand marked out for this condemnation. They're ungodly persons," number 1. Again, he'll speak in 3. There are people who turn the grace of God into licentiousness. And number 3, they deny our only Master and Lord, Jesus Christ. He says, first of all, that certain people have crept in unnoticed. How could these ungodly teachers get in the church unnoticed when book after book, letter after letter has said, be careful, watch out for them? The only way that could happen is if this church is asleep. Remember I told you about my brother's dog, the great watchdog that fell asleep and the thieves came in and stole everything in sight. Well, that's obviously what happened to the church. They were asleep. They had been warned. He says these people are 3 things. They're ungodly. And on your outline, what that means is they refuse to submit to God's authority. I put they reject the ruler so we can remember it. The second thing they did was they lived licentiously, or they practiced immorality without shame. Remember Peter talked about that in 2 Peter. He said they would carouse in the daytime. There was no shame. They didn't wait till dark to cover it. They had no shame about their sin. And the third thing was they deny our only Master, Jesus Christ. They deny that Jesus is Lord and God, or God and Lord, both by their words and by their lifestyle. And do you notice the progression here? He says, first of all, they reject the ruler. And because they reject the ruler, they live licentiously. And because they're living licentiously, they deny the deity, because if they admit that Jesus is God, they'll have to stop living licentiously. And because they deny the deity, they will be judged. That's the progression of this book, that sin leads to judgment. Rejecting God leads to judgment.